Cost caps are one of the hottest topics in Meta. They've been one of the hottest topics in Meta for probably the greater portion of 5 years. And it's very, very important that they're done properly. So this entire section I want to give with a warning at first. That warning is very simply that if you are not scaling aggressively and already spending a boatload of money, likely upwards of $50 to $100,000 per month, cost caps are very unlikely to sustainably work for you. That said, I know a lot of people have questions about caps, and I'm going to talk about them. This is part opinion based on what I've seen work, and part just like read the label of what and how these things are supposed to function. Now, I think the important part to recognize here is that there are a lot of nuances for when, where, how you should use cost caps. I'm going to do all of this from my experiences using cost caps. Most of the time that I spent managing some of the largest accounts I've ever managed were in a cost cap environment. And most gigantic accounts, we're talking like $2 million budgets plus, basically all of them are managed in cost caps. The biggest factor of a cost cap being successful outside of the initial setup, that's probably the most important part, but outside of the initial setup is having a massive amount of data flowing in to support that cap. So with that said, just be really mindful. If you are listening to this and you're spending like 300, 500 bucks a day, save yourself these 15 minutes and don't worry about it right now. This is really for the rare case of aggressive scaling and very strict CPA targets. So, that said, let's talk about what cost caps are, how you can properly implement them, and then most importantly, like how you can make sure they're sustainable for your business. Okay, first things first, what the heck is a cost cap? Most people at this stage have a general idea of what a cost cap is, but the rules of the game have changed a little bit. So, if we hover over, or really just click our cost per result goal, which is the new version of a cost cap, there's in all our ad sets that are running maximized number of conversions. There's a very simple label here. It says Meta will aim to spend your entire budget and get the most purchases using the highest volume bid strategy, period. If keeping the average cost per result around a certain amount is important, enter a cost per result goal. I think just about everyone agrees that keeping your cost per result at around a certain amount is important. Like, I think that's pretty much valid for every single person. Now, the way a cost cap is basically supposed to function is, I'll show you guys on like a little chart here. So your cost cap set to, let's say, $50, which we're going to say this mark is the $50 mark. What's supposed to happen is on a, not necessarily daily basis, but on a 7-day look back window, the cap is supposed to act as a point where your budget will either reduce or spend in full based on if it's being hit or not. So think about every little nook here as a full week has gone by, just to keep this really simple. If you set your cap to $50, which is going to be indicated by this red line right here, and then we're going to plot out actually your actual performance, which is going to be in blue. So if on week 1, you had a cost per result of 60, which is above the $50 threshold. Week 2, you had a cost per result of 40. Week 3, you were above again. Week 5, you were here. This is a normal situation for not having a cap. What happens in a normal no cap environment, which we're going to show in green, is your spend is the same all the time. So your spend is exactly the same. That's the normal situation, right? If there's no cost cap in place, you're setting your budget, you set $1,000 a day, and it spends every single day $1,000 a day, and your cost per results generally stay the same, but they float around because there's no cap in place. In a cost cap environment, what should happen is two things. These blue dots should actually be significantly closer to your line. So they should be floating more frequently closer to the line. The variable now, instead of flat spend and variable CPA, you should have flat CPA and variable spend. Just make sure that's very, very clear to everyone. When you set a cost cap, you're no longer controlling for spend, you're controlling for cost cap. You're controlling for an average cost per acquisition. Because you control for the average cost per acquisition, your variable is now spend. In a normal situation, it's the opposite. You're controlling for spend usually, and therefore your variable is your cost per acquisition. So in this case, if your cost per acquisition is remaining steady, what actually winds up happening is, I'll use this line here, you wind up spending different amounts. So the campaign launches here, you wind up spending your budget to $500 when it's a little bit above the cap. Now that it's a little under the cap, you're actually going to spend more. Now that it's above the cap again, you're actually going to spend a little bit less. Now that it's under the cap, you're going to spend more, and so on. And this is the perfect scenario. The perfect scenario is your cost per acquisition floats right around the $50 mark that you set it at. Let's make sure that's clear. $50 CPA. That's the blue dots. It's floating right around your CPA mark. Your spend goes up when it's under the mark, therefore you get more scale at an affordable cost, and your spend goes down when it's not at an affordable cost. This is the perfect scenario. This is pretty much what happens at scale. This is pretty much what happens to those advertisers that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, well beyond hundreds of thousands of dollars. What happens to the smaller advertiser is, as I said, well, you shouldn't do this, but what happens most of the time is there's not enough signals to validate if the CPA is going to change at the first half, second half, or basically very tail end of the week. And therefore, you have inconsistent cost per acquisition. So you have some that are way above the mark, some that are way under the mark. And you have spending that's also variable. So you have two variable elements, meaning nothing is forecastable, nothing is predictable, and oftentimes your results are actually worse because what happens is it can only achieve your cost per result by hitting existing and engaged customers, which is not where you want to be spending the majority of your money. Warnings aside, if this functions the way it's supposed to function, this is technically how it's supposed to function, we have a fantastic system. However, obviously we know it doesn't always function like this. But let's say you are setting cost caps. You're spending that 100K plus per month. You're in this scenario where you're comfortable here. Let me explain to you how you should be setting your caps and how you should be setting your budgets, because both of these are very impacting of each other. So first off, you want to set your cap at your real target. So your cap, we'll say here, we'll just go in black so I don't start confusing everyone with different colors. So your cost cap, we'll say CC, is equal to your actual target. So your TCPA, okay? So that means if you need your target CPA to be $50 to be profitable on first purchase, that's your cost cap. Don't mess with this. Don't try to game the system and try to squeeze a couple dollars out. You need your TCPA to be equal to your cost cap to start. What we do after that, we'll talk about in a second. Your budget needs to be set in a way that is allowing flexibility. So if you are comfortable spending as much money as possible into your CPA, in your target CPA, then what you basically want to be doing is setting your budget at an 80% threshold. What this means is, let's say you set your budget to $1,000. The objective, if you set your budget to $1,000, is for the cost cap on average to spend $800. That's the objective. If it's consistently spending $800, what that means for you is it is restricted by the cap. It's a perfect scenario. And then what that means, which is the real good scenario, it means that on good days, it's going to spend your 1,000 or greater. It's going to spend 1,000 plus because it's been underspending, so it's allowed to go over. And then what it means is on bad days, it's going to spend less than the 800 because it's restricted. So maybe it spends 500 or less. The beauty of this is that when CPAs are being hit, it spends more. When CPAs are not being hit, it spends less. Now, there's a couple scenarios here. What do we do if we've set to $1,000 and we've set to our target CPA and we're on actually the good side of this and it's spending 1,000 every day and we're hitting our target? Okay. So if we are hitting our goal, so target is being achieved. So TCPA plus budget, so TPA being hit plus budget spent. Okay. What do we do in this scenario right here? You have two options in this scenario. Option number one is very simple, increase budget. So we'll just like stem this out here so we can see a little bit of a visual here. So option number one of this is straight up increase budget. Option number two here is decrease TCPA. Try to get more efficient. You should really only do this by $1, $2 maybe, right? This is like, we're not trying to like chunk out like $10 here. Now, I always want to scale brands, right? Think about your contribution margin. Don't necessarily think about like squeezing like 5% efficiency out. You want to increase scale. The way you increase scale is you increase budget and you continue to hit the TCPA. So what I would like to do is I would like to increase budget and keep my CPA the same until we reach this balance again. We want to be in this balance. We want to increase our budget until we are not spending it in full every single day, and big and the TCPA, the target cost cap, is being hit. So if you have your cost cap at $50, as we were using in this example above, cost cap's at $50, it's being achieved, meaning you're getting $50 roughly cost per acquisitions, and you're spending in full, increase your budget. Okay. Now what happens if the opposite scenario, which is very common here, which is your TCPA is not hit and your budget's being spent in full? This would be a very bad scenario. The first thing I want you to ask yourself is, should I even be running cost caps? Am I spending enough to run cost caps? Because this generally should not be occurring, right? This would mean your cost cap is not being followed. Now, this happens quite a bit. So what I would just recommend in this case is just to be really simple here and decrease CPA. Like I'm not going to overcomplicate this. So decrease, increase CPA. Increase your cost cap. TCPA is not being achieved, budget's being spent, increase your cost cap. The reason you simply increase your cost cap here is because we don't want this budget to be spent in full. This is an easy way to start to create restriction in your account, which is what we're trying to achieve. The other scenario here is TCPA is not being hit and budget is not being spent. If TCPA is not being hit and budget's not being spent, then you are in the double bad scenario. This basically is indicating that not only is Facebook thinking that it can't hit your cost cap, but it also is already restricting you down. If this is the case, I would probably advise you just not use cost caps here at all at this point. But if this is the case, then the easy thing to do is like increase your cap ability. But again, you're technically only increasing your caps up to your target cost per acquisition. I'm recognizing right now that as I'm talking through this, like this is advanced and this makes no sense unless you are really an advanced operator here. So yeah, just bear that in mind for this video. Like this is supposed to be advanced. So if your TCPAs are not being hit and your budget's not being spent, then technically you need to increase your cost caps to get budget to spend. However, the real thing that you should be doing here is make more creative. This is the real situation that needs to be going on here. And it should also be going on here. The real objective, if your TCPAs are not being hit and either your budget is spent or not spent, is you need to make more creative. The good part about this top scenario, where TCPA is not hit but budget's being spent, is there's at least signals in that creative that indicate to Facebook that long tail, it might work. So in this case, it might be like iterate creative. And in this case, it might be more along the lines of like make more new creative. This is not a perfect science. This is just like general workflows that I like to think about. The scenario you should be living in is this scenario. Your TCPA should be getting hit and your budget should either be getting spent or not spent. Now, what do you do in the last scenario, which is kind of the point of a cap, actually? Your TCPA is being achieved, but your budget is not being spent. Okay. If your budget is not being spent, but your cost per acquisition is being achieved, your cost cap is being hit, then, well, there's two things you can do that kind of make this pretty easy, actually, for yourself. If we are hitting our cost cap, $50 cost cap, and we have $1,000 budget, but only $500 of that is being spent per day. Well, the first thing is like it is functioning the way you want it to function. It is literally restricting the budget simply because it can't achieve the cap. Now, the problem is cost caps tend to work in very limiting factors, meaning if you set your cost cap to 50, the $51 cost cap might function very, very differently than the 50. Because the gap between 50 and 51 is a couple of percentage points, and that couple of percentage points is, I mean, it's 2%. That couple of percentage points is enough to move the needle and open up some more inventory for you. So the first route people do is they increase the TCPA. This is fine only if your cost cap is not equal to your target CPA. So if your cost cap is equal to your TCPA, then you can't increase. You're not trying to ruin your goals to make a cost cap spend. If your cost cap is not equal to your TCPA and you did something that I didn't recommend up front and you said, hey, my goal is 50, but I'm going to set my cost cap to 45 because I'm going to get a little greedy, okay? I'm going to tell Facebook not my real goal. I'm going to tell it a fake goal. That's how Facebook thinks about this, by the way. Let's give it our real goals first off. But if you didn't listen to me, which is fine, and you set 45, then work it up. Go from 45 to 46. Just like slowly work this up from 45 to 46. See what happens at 46 for a few days. See what happens at 47 for a few days. Problem with this is obvious. You're wasting so much time here when you could have just set it to 50. Got what you deserve anyway, right? You want to max out, then restrict it at the highest cap. It's very straightforward. Okay. Now what happens if you did what I said and you have a $50 cost cap and you are setting it to 50, right? So you're setting it the right way already. Ladies and gentlemen, make more creative. It sucks. Just make more creative. Probably iterate on creative more than anything, or probably both. Like you're so close. If you are, let's put that back there. If you are hitting your target and budget's like spent at 50%, not 80% that we want, just crank out new creative. It's the key for this. This is like, you're so close to getting there. Okay. Cost caps, man. They are a thing. They are very important at scale, particularly. Now, what I just went through applies to all bid caps, cost caps, and target ROASs. In most cases, cost caps are the most effective. T-ROAS is a little bit newer to the game, especially with view-through attribution, but you want to apply the exact same functions in a target ROAS setup or in a bid cap setup. My recommendation, the reason I'm only going to cover cost caps right now, is because I have seen cost caps to be the most effective for e-commerce brands today. So I would run them over others. If you're running a T-ROAS, which we actually have seen to be quite successful in more recent months, then sure, that's fine. But bid caps, you got to be an extremely advanced operator to run effective bid caps, and I would try to stay away if you can.